This is Ploy. She's 26. I'm 65. Back home in Ohio, a picture like this would make people talk. They'd call me a fool, maybe a predator. They'd call her a gold digger. Some might even whisper that she's trapped and that I'm taking advantage of a situation I don't even understand. We've been living together for 2 years, right here in Bangkok, and we hear the whispers. We see the stares from other foreigners at the grocery store. We feel the judgment radiating off the screen during video calls with family back in the States. The truth is, they're not entirely wrong, but they're not right either. And that messy, uncomfortable space in between is where our life is actually built. It's the part that nobody ever shows you. People want this story to be simple. They want it to be either a fairy tale romance or a cynical, ugly transaction. They don't have a category for a partnership that started with a business proposal. They don't know what to do with a love story that involves contracts and tuition payments and a 39-year age gap. I'm about to show you the part of this life that never makes it into the travel vlogs. The part that doesn't fit into a 30-second highlight reel. But before I show you our life today, I need to take you back to where it all started. And it didn't start here, in the heat and noise of Thailand. It started in the silence. The crushing, deafening silence of an empty house in Akron, Ohio, with a microwave lasagna and a future that felt like it was already over. For 40 years, my world was a 2-mile radius in Akron, Ohio. It was the drive from my house to the Goodyear factory, a place where I started on the floor and ended as a production manager. You don't survive 4 decades in a place like that by being a fool. You learn to be precise. You learn to be reliable. You become the guy people count on to see a problem before it happens and fix it. That was me, Gary Thompson, the guy who had a plan for everything. I had a plan for retirement. My wife, Sandra, and we had it all mapped out. We were high school sweethearts, married for 35 years. We had 2 great kids, a house we'd paid off, and by the time I hung up my steel-toed boots, a 401k with $450,000 in it. On top of that, a company pension that paid out $2,200 a month, regular as rain. We were set. We had done everything right. But you can't plan for some things. You can't spreadsheet your way around a cancer diagnosis. When Sandra passed, 4 years ago, the plan just evaporated. The first year after she was gone is a blur. The kids called constantly. Neighbors brought food. But time moves on. The kids have their own careers, their own families in other states, and you can't blame them for that. That's the goal, right? To see them build their own lives. But the house gets quiet. So quiet you can hear the electricity humming in the walls. You start noticing things you never did before. Like how a single person only needs to take the garbage out once every 2 weeks. You go to the grocery store, the same one you've been going to for 30 years, and you feel invisible. Just an old guy buying a single pork chop and a can of soup. My life had become a routine of waiting. Waiting for the sun to go down so I could watch TV. Waiting for the phone to ring. Waiting for, I don't know what. The breaking point came on my 63rd birthday. I was sitting at our kitchen table, the one we bought in the 80s, eating a microwave lasagna. I'd bought the family-size portion because buying the single-serving one just felt too pathetic. On the TV, some travel show was on, and it landed on a segment about a night market in Bangkok. All I saw was chaos. The steam, the shouting, the colors, thousands of people packed together, laughing, eating, living. It was just an explosion of life. And I looked down at my sad, silent lasagna, in my sad, silent house, and I felt something I hadn't felt in 2 years. I felt angry. I was angry that my life had shrunk to this. The next morning, I opened my laptop. I didn't have a grand adventure in mind. I just had a desperate need for a change of scenery, a need for noise. I typed in Thailand long-stay visa. I read about the retirement visa, how you needed to prove you had 800,000 baht in a Thai bank account. It seemed complicated, but for the first time in a long time, it felt like a problem I could actually solve. I wasn't looking for a new wife. I wasn't trying to replace the life I'd lost. I was just a guy who was tired of the silence. I was looking for a pulse. That first breath of air outside Suvarnabhumi Airport at 6 in the morning, it's like a physical thing. A wave of heat and humidity that smells like diesel fumes and flowers and food all mixed together. It wasn't unpleasant. It was just alive. After 2 years of tiptoeing around a silent house, the noise was a relief. The traffic, the people shouting, the constant hum of a city that never really sleeps. It was exactly what I needed. I found a place in a neighborhood called On Nut. Nothing fancy. A 2-bedroom condo for about 25,000 baht a month, which is around 700 bucks. It was more space than I needed, but I was used to having a house. I found a little restaurant down the street, one of those open-air places with plastic chairs and a metal roof. The food was good, it was cheap, and the family who ran it was nice. I started eating there most nights. It became my new routine, and that's where I met Ploy. She wasn't a girl in a bar. She was a waitress. You could see she was exhausted, running back and forth from the kitchen to the tables. But she always had this little smile, this spark. One night, I saw her sitting in a corner during a lull with a textbook and a notebook, trying to scribble down notes. It was an English textbook. So the next night, I asked her about it. And that's how it started. She'd bring me my food, and I'd help her with verb conjugations. After a couple of weeks, she started showing me around on her days off. Not the tourist traps, but the real places. The markets where locals actually shop, the temples that aren't in the guidebooks. I got to know her story. She was sending half of everything she made back to her family in a village up in Akron, in the northeast. The other half was going to night school and just barely surviving in one of the most expensive cities in the world. And she was smart, really smart. You could see the drive she had. It reminded me of the young guys back at the factory, the ones you knew were going to move up, the ones who had that hunger to build something. And I started thinking. In my old life, my job was to manage assets. You had a machine, you had people, you had a budget, and you made them work together in the most efficient way possible to produce a result. I looked at my life. I had the money. My pension covered my bills, and that 401k was just sitting there. My own kids were grown and settled. What was I saving it for? And I had this deep, crushing need for companionship. Not just someone to have dinner with, but someone to be on a team with again. I looked at Ploy. She had the potential, but she was trapped, working herself to the bone just to stay afloat. And a thought took hold, a very clear, practical thought. Maybe we could be assets for each other. I spent a week turning it over in my mind. How to say it without sounding like some creepy old man. How to make it a respectable proposal, a deal between two adults. I finally just asked her to sit down with me after her shift was over. I was more nervous than I'd been in years. I just laid it all out. I said, Ploy, I'm going to be very direct with you. You are one of the hardest working, smartest people I have ever met. But you're running on a treadmill. You can't get ahead when you're working 70 hours a week just to pay for school. I took a breath and just said it. I have the means to help you. I can pay for your university tuition. All of it. I can make sure you don't have to work at all, that you can focus completely on your studies and build a real future for yourself. In return, I said, I'm asking for your companionship, for your time, to be my partner in this new life I'm trying to build. You bring a light and a life into my world that I honestly thought I had lost forever. I remember looking her right in the eye. Let's not pretend this is a fairy tale. Let's be partners. I want to invest in your future, not just give you an allowance. She just stared at me for the longest time. I could see her turning it over in her head. She didn't cry. She didn't get angry. She just looked at me with this intense focus, the same way she looked at her textbooks. She was calculating. She was weighing the risks. She was doing exactly what a smart person would do. And after a long silence, she asked me a single question. What happens when I graduate? It was the best question she could have asked. And it was the beginning of a whole new set of problems. My answer to her question was the most important thing I would ever say in this new life. I told her, when you graduate, you'll be a woman with a degree, with options, with a future that you built. You won't need me anymore. And that's the whole point of this investment. My only hope is that, by then, you'll still want to be my partner. But that will be your choice, and your choice alone. I think that was the moment she knew I was serious. That I wasn't trying to buy her, but to back her. She accepted. And just like that, everything changed. She quit her job at the restaurant the next day. The exhaustion started to fade from her eyes. Within a week, she was enrolled in a business administration program at a good university here in Bangkok. I remember making that first tuition payment. 80,000 baht. It's about 20 to 100 US dollars. It wasn't a small amount, but it felt different from any money I'd ever spent. It didn't feel like an expense. It felt like I was finally putting my resources to work on something that mattered again. Our life fell into a new routine. A good one. My monthly pension, that 20 to 100 dollars, it covered almost everything. Our rent was only 700 bucks. With food and bills and her school supplies, Our total budget was about $2,500 a month, so I'd pull a few hundred from the 401k each month, just as I planned. It was sustainable. It was easy. The silence I had run away from was gone. Instead, there was the sound of her typing on her laptop, the smell of her cooking something I'd never tried before, the simple act of having someone to say goodnight to. For the first time in years, I wasn't just waiting for the day to end. We'd explore the city. She'd take me to food stalls tucked into alleys that you'd never find on your own. I'd help her with her essays, using that old factory manager part of my brain to help her structure an argument. She was brilliant. She absorbed everything like a sponge, and I felt useful again. I wasn't just some old guy in a condo. I was part of a team. We were building something. It was a quiet happiness. It wasn't a vacation. It was just life, a shared life, and it felt more real than anything I'd experienced since Sandra was alive. I thought I had everything figured out. I thought this is it. This is the plan. We had our partnership. We had our budget. We had our routine. It was all working perfectly. And for about 6 months, it did. I was so confident, so sure that I had successfully sidestepped all the usual traps. Then one evening, as we were sitting on the balcony, she turned to me with that serious look I'd come to recognize. She said, "It is time. You need to come with me to my village. You need to meet my family." That trip to Iceland felt like traveling back in time. You leave the Bangkok skyline behind, and the concrete and steel just meld away into endless green rice paddies. It's flat, it's hot, and it's quiet in a way that's completely different from the silence of my house in Akron. This was a living quiet, full of the sound of insects and wind. Ploy was excited, chattering away, pointing out landmarks from her childhood. I just gripped the handle in the minivan, feeling a knot tighten in my stomach. I was about to meet the people whose daughter I had, for all intents and purposes, made a deal with. How do you explain that to a father? Her village was a small collection of wooden houses on stilts. Dogs and chickens ran free. When we pulled up, the whole family came out onto the porch. Her mother smiled and gave me a Y, the traditional greeting, but her father and 2 older brothers just stood there, arms crossed, watching me. You don't work in a factory for 40 years without learning how to read men. Their faces were completely blank, which is always more intimidating than anger. It's the look of men who are reserving judgment, and you know that judgment is going to be tough. That night, we all sat on the floor and ate. I couldn't understand a word they were saying, but I could feel the conversation revolving around me. The brothers would look at me, then at Ploy, then say something in a low voice to their father. Ploy kept a brave face, but I could see the tension in her shoulders. The next day, her father asked to speak with me, with Ploy translating. He was a farmer, a man whose hands were like leather. He looked me dead in the eye and said, "My daughter is a good daughter. She works hard. What are your intentions?" I had rehearsed this. I told him, through Ploy, that my intention was to support her future, to see her get the education she deserved, and to be her partner. Then came the part one was dreading. He started talking about sin sod, the dowry. My mind, the old American mind, immediately screamed, "You're paying for her." But I looked at Ploy, and I looked at her father, and I saw this wasn't a transaction. It was about honor. It was about showing you are serious, that you value their daughter enough to make a real, tangible commitment to the family who raised her. We didn't haggle. Ploy explained the situation, and we agreed on a number that was respectful but not flashy. 200,000 baht, about $5,500. It was a significant chunk out of my savings, but as I handed it over, it didn't feel like I was buying a wife. It felt like I was being accepted into a family. For the first time, her father smiled at me. Coming back to Bangkok, I felt like we had cleared a major hurdle, but the test just came from different directions. We were at a grocery store in a neighborhood popular with expats, and I saw another Western guy, about my age, with his Thai wife. He looked at me, then at Ploy, and then gave me this little smirk and a nod, like we were in on the same secret. I felt a hot flash of shame and anger. He was putting me in a box, the one labeled old fool with a bar girl. That night, I was scrolling through Facebook, and a guy I used to work with at Goodyear, a guy I'd known for 30 years, commented on a picture I posted of Ploy and me. He wrote, "Living the dream, eh, Gary? Hope you know what you're doing." It felt like a punch to the gut. The worst was a video call with my daughter, Sarah. She was trying to be nice, but the concern in her voice was suffocating. "Dad, are you sure about this?" She's my age. Are you sending her family money? I tried to explain our arrangement, our partnership. She just got quiet and said, I just worry you're being taken advantage of. After the call, the silence in our condo felt heavy. I looked at Ploy, busy with her homework, and that horrible, insidious voice crept back into my head for the first time in months. Is this real? Does she actually care about me? Or am I just a walking, talking ATM? We started to have small arguments. Friction. I like it quiet in the evenings. She'd have TikTok videos blaring from her phone, one after another, this endless stream of noise and silly dances. I want to listen to my old classic rock, and she'd put on some Thai pop music that sounded like a catfight in a recording studio. I'm a morning person. She'd stay up until 2 a.m. studying and then sleep until noon. These were tiny things, but they were reminders of the 39-year gap between our worlds. But Ploy, she's not a pushover. She called me out. She told me I was a stubborn old man, stuck in my ways. She dragged me to a concert of one of her favorite singers. It was loud and chaotic, and I hated most of it. But I saw her face, so full of joy, and I realized this is part of the deal. It's not about her fitting into my world. It's about us building a new one together. Then came the night I thought the new world was going to kill me. It started with a bad plate of oyster omelets from a street stall I should have known better than to eat from. By 3 a.m., I was in a bad way. A very bad way. I've never been so sick in my life. I was dizzy, I couldn't stand up, and everything was coming out of me from both ends. I was scared. I was weak and helpless, and all I could think was, I'm an old man, alone in a foreign country, and I'm in real trouble. And that's when Ploy took over. The student, the girl I was helping, she was gone. In her place was this general. She didn't panic. Her voice was firm. She got me dressed, half-carried me down to a taxi, and told the driver which hospital to go to. At the emergency room, it was chaos. But she was a rock. She spoke to the nurses in rapid-fire Thai, handled all the paperwork, and never left my side. They put me on N4 for dehydration, and for the next 6 hours, she was right there, holding a cool cloth to my head, talking to the doctors, translating what they were saying. In that moment, I wasn't her benefactor. I wasn't the guy with the 401k. I was just a sick, scared old man, and she was my partner. She was my protector. When we finally left, the bill was about 15,000 baht, around 415 bucks. As I paid it, I knew, with a certainty that went bone deep, that the care she had just given me. You can't put a price on that. It wasn't in our contract. That was real. That night at the hospital, that was the breaking point. Not for us, but for the doubt. It was the last time that little voice in my head, the one that whispered I was a fool, really had anything to shout about. That ghost still visits sometimes, on a quiet afternoon when I'm alone. That's the price you pay for a life built this far outside the lines. But it's just a whisper now. It has no power anymore. The revelation wasn't some dramatic discovery. It was the slow, quiet realization that our life today doesn't look like an adventure or a scandal. It just looks normal. Most evenings, I'm out here on the balcony with a book, and she's inside at the kitchen table, the light from her laptop illuminating a stack of textbooks. She's in her final year now, business administration, top of her class. She's already writing a full business plan for an online store she wants to launch after graduation, a platform for handcrafted goods from villages like hers. The spark I saw in her at that little restaurant has become a controlled fire. She knows exactly where she's going. And the numbers, I know you've been doing the math. So here's the truth. My 401k, the one I started with at 450,000, it's at about 380,000 now. And that's okay. That was part of the plan. Her tuition, the sin sod, the hospital bill, those were investments. Our regular monthly budget, for our condo, for food, for everything, comes in around $2,500. My pension from Goodyear pays for $2,200 of that. So we only have to draw down a few hundred a month from the big pot. It's sustainable. The old factory manager in me is satisfied with the numbers. So what's the final verdict? What's the revelation after all the judgment and the fear and the sickness? It's that this thing we built isn't simple. It's not a romance, and it's not a transaction. It's a private contract that accidentally grew a heart. I invested my money in her future, and she, in return, invested her life, her energy, her care, into saving me from my past. She saved me from that silent house in Akron. It's not the fairy tale I would have written for myself 30 years ago. It's better, it's real, and it's a life I'm finally not trying to run away from. So here we are now, back on the balcony where we started. Ploy is inside, at the kitchen table, studying for her final exams. She's going to graduate at the top of her class, and she's already got a 50-page business plan for the company she wants to start. And me? I'm just sitting here, watching the city lights come on, feeling content. The 401k is down to $380,000, and that's fine. It's exactly where it should be. The numbers work, but the numbers aren't the whole story. If you're a guy my age, sitting in a quiet house, watching this and thinking about making a jump, I've got 3 things I need you to understand, not with your heart, but with your gut. First, this isn't a fantasy. If you come here looking for a romance novel, you're going to get eaten alive. You have to walk in with your eyes wide open, like you're negotiating a business deal. Remember when I sat down with Ploy in that restaurant? It wasn't a love confession. It was a proposal between 2 adults. Honesty, right from the start. I'm an old, lonely man with money. You're a young, brilliant woman with no money. We can help each other. If you can't have that brutally honest conversation, don't even get on the plane. Because that honesty is the foundation. Without it, the whole thing is a house of cards. Second, your job is not to be a savior. You're not rescuing anyone. The moment you start thinking you're some white knight saving a poor village girl, you've already lost. You've lost her respect, and you've lost your own. When I paid her tuition, when I paid the sin sod to her father, that wasn't me buying a wife. That was an investment in a partner. It was a bet that her drive, her intelligence, was worth more than the money I was putting in. And I was right. When I was lying on that hospital gurney, sick as a dog, the woman who took charge wasn't some damsel I had saved. She was my partner, protecting her investment. It has to be a 2-way street, or it's a dead end. And that leads to the third thing, the most important one. You have to be willing to face the uncomfortable truths. This life isn't the highlight reels. It's the arguments over the music. It's the judgment from strangers and the worried calls from your kids. It's staring at the ceiling at 3 a.m. wondering if you've made a terrible mistake. The strength of this thing we've built, it wasn't forged in the good times. It was forged in the fire. It was forged when she called me a stubborn old man and forced me to listen to her music. It was forged when she saw me at my weakest, in that hospital, and didn't run away. A relationship with this big an age gap is like an old car. It needs constant maintenance, and it makes some strange noises, but that doesn't mean it can't get you where you need to go. So, if you're a guy my age, sitting in a quiet house and dreaming of this, here's my only advice. Don't come here looking for a fantasy. That's a trap. Come here looking for a partner. And if you're lucky enough to find one, your job isn't to save her. It's to build a real life together, with honesty, with respect, and with the courage to face the truth, even when it's uncomfortable. Especially when it's uncomfortable. If you want to see what that actually looks like day to day, subscribe to our channel. We promise to show you the whole story.